So, it's official. Physical gaming is dead.
Not the leader of a cult, RabbitWithAxe.
Greetings, demons, and welcome to a video that I really wish I didn't have to make, but today, July 1st, 2026, PlayStation released a new blog titled Physical Disc Production Ending in January 2028 for New Games Releasing on PlayStation Consoles. And this is a really shocking development, though I suppose shocking in more the sense of I can't believe it's actually happening unless I wasn't expecting this to happen eventually. So, as I say, this blog post, it was released, it might not have been written by, but it was released by Sid Schumann, who's the senior director of Sony Entertainment, and it essentially just goes over the fact that starting January 2028, PlayStation are not going to be producing discs for PlayStation consoles. Everything is going to be digital from that date. In terms of new stuff, they do say that it won't affect anything releasing before that date, so I'm not sure if it's a case of games released before that date will continue to be produced physically after January 2028, and it's just anything released after will no longer have a physical disc. But either way, this really does paint a picture of what the future of gaming is looking like, and we've known this was happening for a while. You know, you look all the way back to the PSP Go, the old digital PSP, and, you know, we did jump quite a while then with plenty of disc drives, but the Xbox SAD, and then this generation with the Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X Digital Edition, the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, the PlayStation Pro, and Slim not having a disc drive by default, it's all pointed to the fact that we are going for a all-digital future. And I'm sure plenty of you watching this video right now will think, that's not a major deal, you know, I don't personally buy digital or whatever you may be thinking. Personally, I buy a lot of physical. I buy a lot of actual discs, and I think the main thing that we have to keep in mind when it comes to them ceasing production of discs is that it means that the second-hand market will no longer exist for any game released after January 2028, at least for PlayStation platforms. We don't know if this is also going to become a thing for Xbox, and in some ways we already kind of know the way that Nintendo is heading eventually, though hopefully not for a much longer time span. But realistically, we kind of already knew that this was the way that games in general were going, with the fact that GTA 6, obviously one of the most anticipated games of the last decade, is releasing a physical edition that doesn't have a disc. We already know that. That is confirmed. There may be a disc in the future, we do not know. But either way, that is a major AAA, highly anticipated release that is having a physical retail presence, but without a disc. It's going to have a digital code, and that's going to be it. That's the only way you can get GTA 6, at least at launch. And PlayStation actually announcing this, Sony actually announcing this, that they are no longer going to be producing PlayStation games physically, is a really worrying thing for the future of gaming, in my opinion. It basically means that we are going to be stuck in a licensing future. Everything that you buy in terms of gaming is going to be just a license that they can revoke at any time. They can ban your account, they can remove your purchases. Like, we've literally just seen PlayStation remove a ton of movies from people's accounts because their license ran out. They can no longer host those movies, you know, including like Terminator 2 and Rambo and stuff like that. They can no longer be hosted because the license ran out. How long until PlayStation games that you've paid good money for a digital copy, for a digital license, how long until they can't be held on the store anymore? We're already seeing, starting from next year, we're going to be losing both the PS Vita and PS3 stores, and while, you know, most people have moved on to other platforms by now, with the PS Vita especially, that is a platform that, without the digital storefront, is going to be losing a lot of games to the sands of time. There are a lot of games that are on PS Vita that aren't playable anywhere else due to the fact that it requires the back touchscreen or any of the other random features that PS Vita happens to have. So the fact that not only are we having more store closures, which we've seen that from Nintendo, you know, both the 3DS and Wii U stores were closed, But when it comes to PlayStation, this is the first major instance of this happening, because the PSP store technically still exists. You haven't been able to access it on the PSP, but all its content was carried over to the PS Vita store, and in part at least the PS3 and PS4 stores. But as of right now, it's looking like pretty much anything that was PS Vita exclusive is not going to be available pretty soon. And as I say, when it comes to PS3 stuff, it's a little bit different. PS3 stuff is still widely available on PS4 and PS5, so until the PS4 store closes, that's probably alright. But all this points at the fact that Sony is very prepared for a future where the consumer, the customer, us, gamers, will not own anything. Will not have the ability to trade in or, buy pre-owned or anything like that, because everything will be digital. Stores will only sell licenses, nothing permanent. It's all going to be DRM based, as it has been for the history of gaming realistically, and there's not really anything we can do about it. Now, Sony in their blog post did point out that this is due to consumer trends, and I will probably agree there that most consumers, your average consumer, is probably not buying physical discs anymore. However, that doesn't mean that no one is buying physical discs. You look at the fact that things like vinyl and even audio cassette has returned as a format for people listening to music. The fact that, despite the fact that many retailers have closed that do physical media, places like HMV in the UK are still selling so much music on CD, vinyl, now cassette. They're also selling movies on both DVD and Blu-ray, even 4K Blu-ray. And the fact that this is pointing in a direction of that stuff just going away is really worrying, because while it is niche, while it is something that only really, die-hard fans of certain content are going to be consuming, physical discs are still so important to keeping games alive, keeping things actually archived and actually allowing things to survive future generations. How many games can you think of right now that have been delisted from storefronts, and for however long either weren't available at all or were only available through some form of piracy and emulation? The main one that sticks out in my mind, which thankfully has returned, is the Scott Pilgrim video game, but even then, that only came back because somebody else bought the rights and decided to do a re-release. That could have been lost to time. We've seen that with the Simpsons arcade game as well. There's been so many examples of games that, due to licensing issues, have been unavailable for some time. Thankfully, a lot of them do come back eventually, but it reminds me of things like the War for Cybertron games. Most Transformers games in general, in fact, are not available on any storefront, despite most of them, or a decent portion of them, being available originally on storefronts that are still active. A lot of the games that were on the 360 and Xbox One from the Transformers franchise, you cannot buy, even though the 360 and Xbox One stores are still there. And that's purely down to the fact that the licensing that, I think in that case, Activision had, expired. They weren't able to keep those games on the storefront. So what happens when you can't get a physical copy? Right now, if I wanted to, I could spend the £70 or whatever it is for War for Cybertron on 360, physically from CEX, and there we go, I have a copy of the game. That's fine, it's not ideal that you have to spend that much, but that does mean that you can at least still play the game. However, if there's no physical discs, if there's no physical copies, you can't do that. You simply can't. You are unable to purchase these games once they are delisted. There's been a lot of conversation over the last few years, and it's really ramped up in the last year or two, around the idea of ownership when it comes to video games, and software in general, in fact. And a lot of it just stems from the fact that so much stuff is being taken away from us, or servers are closed down and you just can't play a game because it's online only, or whatever DRM service that used to host your product no longer exists. This stuff happens so very often, and it makes you realize, and it has caused a lot of communities to arise around this, the idea that if buying isn't owning, then piracy isn't stealing. And I'm not going to sit here and say you should pirate your games. Of course not. You should support the developers, you should support the studios, because at the end of the day, if no one buys anything, then the industry will just die. we won't have games to play if everyone just pirates everything. So still buy stuff, but at a certain point, when storefronts are closed, when games are delisted with no physical way of getting them, at what point is that not correct to then get a ROM, to, find them elsewhere on some, potentially shady site? But at that point, that is the one way you can actually purchase, or at least acquire, for lack of a better word, these games. It really does bring to the front the idea that for the last decade, maybe a bit longer, gaming has been on a beeline to no ownership. You, as a consumer, as a customer, will pay all this money, and then it'll just be taken away. And we obviously see that with people having their Switch 2s bricked, because they wanted to use their Switch in a way that Nintendo didn't want them to. We obviously see that with people losing things in various online games, whether that be Call of Duty or Fortnite or Overwatch, where maybe they have been cheating or doing something against terms of service, but they then lose their accounts, including any DLC they've bought, any cosmetics they've purchased, any in-game currency, anything like that. Because you simply do not own what you pay for. And at a certain point, I think the industry as a whole, whether it's PlayStation or Microsoft or Nintendo or whoever, they're going to wake up and realize that what they've done is alienated far too many customers, and there will be an increase in piracy. Just to finish off this video, I just want to point out one line towards the end of the blog post. We remain committed to delivering a world-class gaming experience to our fans, and we thank you for your continued support. That is how Sid Schumann decided to end this blog post. And the more I think about it, the more hollow it feels. Because Sony and PlayStation and Sid Schumann do not care about delivering a world-class gaming experience. They don't. What they care about is profit and controlling the market. And the best way to do that is to prevent reselling, is to prevent the open market from doing what it does best, which is make things cheaper over time, and most importantly, locking people into their ecosystem. And while I would say generally most people during maybe the Xbox One PS4 era got locked into what ecosystem they were going to live in, for the rest of time, this is Sony putting its foot down and saying, no, if you're a PlayStation player, you will be a PlayStation player forever, because you don't want to lose your games. You don't want to lose your licenses. And we can only hope that those will carry over into the generations to come, however much they end up costing. With all that being said, that is going to be it for this video. So I hope you got something out of this. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Otherwise, comment below your thoughts and feelings on this entire situation. I will have both the blog post relating to the discontinuation of discs, as well as the closure of the PS3 and PS Vita stores, linked in the description below so you can check them out yourself. And otherwise, it can be it from me. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Look at the screen, you'll be fine. Culture's a disease, but we'll survive. I just wanna take